Here's our vision: a district where everybody's human right to housing is realised, and we want to facilitate positive change for people wanting affordable, healthy and sustainable housing.
Kia ora and welcome to the Homefulness Show. I'm your host, Zola Rose, located in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We believe housing can be a means for regenerative placemaking to create affordable and sustainable homes and neighborhoods developed in collaboration with the communities that live there. We'll be exploring different housing models and neighborhood designs and innovation in energy, water, waste, construction, land use, and food systems. We showcase housing policies, finance, funding, and community engagement to unlock this potential. This show aims to empower you with knowledge, resources, and networks to support you in creating great places to live. Come join us as we bring to life the more beautiful housing that we know is possible. This podcast has a slightly different format. This is actually a recording of the Women Revolutionising Housing online presentation with Ruth Gerzon about WHARE, the Whakatāne Housing Action Reform Enthusiast Network, and the work she's been doing in Whakatāne for housing justice. This was an online presentation, so there are other participants in this presentation who you'll hear talking as well. The other participants that you can hear are Christine and Charlie. Ruth participated in the first Women Revolutionising Housing retreat that I held in June 2021, and we've been keeping in touch ever since. I've been hosting these online learning and presentation and networking events so that women like Ruth can share the work that she's been doing in her own community to be able to inspire others and to be able to share the tactics, techniques, any resources that they have. So Ruth wanted her council to be more responsive to the community regarding the housing needs. She was noticing a lot of people that were needing a place to live, and the council was not being as responsive as she and others were believing that they should have been. And so I was invited up to Whakatāne in June of 2023 by the Whakatāne Council's Homelessness Prevention Alliance to run 2 workshops on the concepts of community-led housing and community land trusts and regenerative housing, and ways that the councils in other places have supported such initiatives. Ruth was instrumental in pulling together the WHARE group. She shares in this podcast episode about pulling together a group from the community to share their stories of housing hardship and drawing this attention to council. So that's mainly what she's talking about in this episode. Sorry for any bad recording quality. It was done over Zoom about 9 months ago, but I did think that the content was relevant enough to share here. I hope you enjoy listening.
First, I'll start just by talking a bit of the background. My husband and I live on 13 hectares on the shores of Ohiwa Harbour, which we were lucky enough to buy 40 years ago when land was cheap. There's 2 or 3 little valleys in it, and I was thinking it would be lovely to set up some kind of community here, some kind of pocket neighbourhood, some kind of tiny house or something. But after I left the hui with Zola, things changed. I left it for a while just to see how things panned out. But then eventually something galvanizes you into action. I have spent my whole life working in community development in various ways, in various parts of community development, nationally and locally. So knowing quite a lot of people locally, which was helpful. And I've always written for the newspaper. Anyway, what actually happened, and I think this is how we get change usually, is people have a concern or get angry about something. And I got really angry about something. I got really upset. It was a story of my neighbours who lived in an old schoolhouse. This lovely man in his 70s who had retired with very little money and knew him through the church and offered him a place where he could build his house. I think he'd spent a long time looking after his daughter, who was ill for many years before she died. So he couldn't earn money in his later years. He retired with very little and he's fiercely independent. So he built himself a tiny house. And then one of our council consents officers, or the head of it actually, loves cycling around our community. and cycling past and sees something he doesn't like, and he tells his minions that they've got to go and sort it out and get rid of it. So that's kind of what happened. This guy turned up apologetically because he realised it wasn't a good thing, and said, you can't have a tiny house here without having this and this happening first, and all sorts of other things. He also spotted another old classroom that had been made into a lovely insulated 2-bedroomed house, which houses a couple with their 2 children, and said, no, that's not on our books either. But luckily they got away with that, because a long time back we were part of the Pōtiki Council before we got yanked into Whakatāne against our will. And that particular classroom had been made into a little whare before then, so it was okay under a Pōtiki. So that's kind of what happens. And I think in terms of community development, if you can get a group of concerned citizens, you start getting action. So we were determined, and we don't think that Pete's the only one, but the other things that were concerning and caused us to act is the growing homelessness, the realisation the next generation, there's lots of people who are going without things, just the way housing's seen as a commodity rather than a right. So that was our motivation, was hearing that story and realising he was one of many. And the council were causing the problems. I knew a little bit about the chief executive, and I also know quite a few of the councillors, and we're lucky here we have Māori wards. We have 3 Māori councillors who are really concerned about social issues, so that's the plus, and several other good ones who I knew personally. And there's always good as well as bad actors in our bureaucracies, but we had to test the waters and see who might also be concerned if we brought it to their attention. So we took 2 actions with my neighbours. 2 lots of neighbours came together, and they used their networks and looked around to find others facing similar problems. I then wrote an article for the local newspaper talking about the fact that the council has a role to support us as members of the community who want to help one another. Some of us are really keen to support other people, and they shouldn't be stopping that at a time of homelessness. This is important, and the climate crisis and sustainability and all of those other kinds of things. So I wrote about that, an article in the paper, but I didn't want to blindside the council and put it in the paper without them having a chance to think about and to learn about what's going on. So I sent the article first before I sent it to the newspaper to most of the councillors and the chief executive, and said that this article will be in the paper in a month. We're going to follow it up with a public meeting on this date, and we'd really like you to have a chance to consider how you want to respond to that. So 3 of the councillors then contacted me immediately and said, we'd like to come and visit this guy, Pete, and see what's going on and have a talk to him. So they did. They came down to his home and they expressed concern about what they were seeing. So that was good. We knew that there were at least 3 who were kind of on our side at the beginning. So we then decided to use Facebook, because although I can write articles in the paper, I was conscious that most people don't read the newspaper. We booked a venue, got a couple of packets of biscuits, and I developed a PowerPoint to show. We kind of expected about 35 or 40 people to come, and we actually got 125 packed into this venue. It was amazing. We were thrilled to see so many people coming in, and we had the chief executive, the guy who'd caused all the trouble, and he turned out he'd caused trouble for others as well. Of course, that's always the case. When you hear one story, there'll be others. And we had, I think, it was 5 or 6 councillors, not the mayor, the deputy mayor, but quite a few others. So that was really helpful. I think what was useful about it was the stories. We had 3 stories told of people who were brave enough to get up there in front of everyone and tell its truth to power. I think that was amazing. I was really impressed. And the emotion and the clarity with which they spoke really hits home. You can talk all you like about theories and ideas and homelessness and whatever, but you need to have those stories as well, and powerful stories. So first thing we did was we looked at how Aotearoa, which is our neighbouring council, is so much simpler. 1 dwelling per property, and a Pōtiki 1 per site if it's small, 2 dwellings if you've got more than a hectare, and 3 dwellings if it's 4 or more hectares. I mean, just kind of simple stuff. So we just wanted to say, hey, we don't have to do it the way you do it. There's other ways of doing things. We then looked at the context, the housing crisis, sustainability. And again, when I address something like a council or when any group, your first thing to do is go into the their website and see what their aims are and see if they're really working in concert with their aims or if they're actually working against them. So we talked about how some of the big houses that are being built are not exactly sustainable. And then we told the personal stories. So this was Pete's house. We had some photos, and Pete told about how he'd looked after his daughter till she died and he had no money, and he learned how to build this, and it's on an old tennis court. They say, oh, we can't keep building on arable land. Well, this was nonsense. I'll put this one about our council vision. This was very funny. Our council will be safe and surrounded by people who are friendly and caring. Pete talked about all the neighbours in the community that had enabled him to have that. The chief executive said to me later, where did you get that vision from? I said, well, it's on your website, so really useful to be able to say, well, we're working with your visions. So yeah, that was quite helpful. Elise had a story. That was another very strong story where she had been escaping an abusive husband, had very little money, but managed to buy a small bit of land, no money for a house, put on a bus to live in with her daughter. And again, this council guy just comes cycling past one day and demands to go in without saying who he is or even giving a business card. And she refused because she didn't know who he was and why how have you got the right to visit? And he said, you'll live to regret this. And he came back the next week and he barged into her bus without knocking. She and her daughter were both in bed with COVID. He said, this is unsanitary, it'll have to go. And she said, well, it was a mess because we had COVID, we hadn't washed up. Anyway, so she told that story. You can imagine that went down pretty well. And then another woman, Jane, who got this built in Auckland, put it in the garden. She was 65, wanting to live on a flat place on the plains, and it was in the garden of her daughter's house, but was then told by the council, because again, someone cycled past and saw it. She was told she had to get a geotech report, $7,500. She had to hire a consultant, another $5,000, and she might be able to live there. Oh, she had to put in another septic tank because she couldn't share the septic tank with the house because they had 3 bedrooms and it could be 6 people will live there and she'll live there as well, and that's too many. It's only her daughter and her husband living there, but anyway. So she's still having trouble. This is 5 months ago. The chief executive said, if you're still having problems, let me know, and she is. So I just put her back onto the CEO. Earlier this week, she rang and said, can you tell me this chief executive's email, and I want to get back on her. So that's the kind of thing that's happening. She's had to go back to work in the supermarket to pay off all the extra costs that the council has. Now, the problem is that the council has one lot of rules. They're the same if you build an enormous mansion or if you have a tiny house. They even said that if you live in a caravan, you can't even live in a caravan in the back of someone's house. It means there's 2 dwellings and there's only allowed to be 1 dwelling. And if there's 2 dwellings, you've got to have all these consent issues sorted, which same as if it was a huge house. So why do we need consultants? Why don't they have a simple process that people don't need a consultant to get their way through it? Compliance is so expensive. And why do we need geotech reports in the plains for tiny houses? I thought geotech report was if it's going to slide down a hill or a hill's going to slide on it. This is ridiculous. The policy is rational. Our consent's needed in the time of housing crisis. The pursuit of non-consented tiny houses is a good use of our money. There's hundreds of tiny houses and people living in sheds. Because our area is 50% Māori, there's lots of people living in poverty. My neighbours, kids, living in an unlined tin shed, 1 room only, cold water, no power. And that's how they lived. And they've been there for 3 years. They've been on the Kāinga Ora waiting list for 4 years, haven't got anywhere. So they're just one of many who are living like that in the area. We talked about the lack of trust, and I found out that just 45% of the population trust local government. We're one of the lowest in the OECD, and trust will improve with these expectations of fair treatment of people from different income levels. Now, this is quite interesting because we have since been working with the council, and we started getting complaints from the council more recently. I said to the council that it's too scared to complain to you, and there's no complaints policy on the website, there's only a complaints form, and people think they'll be treated worse if they complain, so they come to us. And I said that to them. I emailed it actually to one of the managers, and he said, oh, it's all right. I think trust will improve when we work with you. And I thought, no, trust will improve when they change their behaviour and their expectations. And trust will improve when people know that. So I immediately emailed back and said, yes, but trust will improve when people know there's been changes. So we've arranged a second public meeting for you to explain 7 months later after the first what has changed. So I hope that'll keep them on their toes. If they know that 125, maybe more this time, will turn up again, expecting to hear a bit more. This is what we want: simple, affordable, flexible process. So what we did was give everyone stickies and pens and ask people to write their questions and put them on a chart. Told them that we would not get their answers during that meeting. We'd just answer a couple of them, but we would give them to the council later and get them from there. So again, you've got to give them a hint of this isn't just one-off meeting, otherwise you're stuffed. You've got to have a plan, a strategy for what happens afterwards. So this is what we suggested. The community, chief executive, after that she'd heard the stories, said that what she'd heard was unacceptable and she would investigate it. One of the Māori councillors actually apologised. So that was about as far as we got. But she was clearly horrified. The chief executive, actually, to be fair to her, she doesn't know what's going on half the time, but her heart's in the right place, and I think we're lucky to have her. The other thing is we had an independent facilitator. I did the PowerPoint, but when it came to the questions and all that part of it, we had an independent facilitator who's really good, because I didn't want anyone to dominate it, so I've got a really strong facilitator for that part of it. Chief executive emailed me and the facilitator the next day and thanked us very much for what we had done and for running this meeting. So that was a real good start, that we had that from her and one of the senior managers. What we did then is we set up a working group, and we got everyone's emails when they came in. We got as many emails and details so we could feed back to them later on. And we sent an expression of interest form out to the group to say, would you like to be on the working group? And what skills would you bring? What time commitment have you got, etc. You have to be careful of people who end up on some of these things. That night, there was a guy who came up and said, oh, you'll need a Facebook page, won't you? And I said, I suppose we will. By the next morning, he'd made us a Facebook page. And by the next day, he'd invited the Minister for Housing to come and visit. I said, you can't do this. We're working as a group. We're as a group of us. You can't just take it away and do your own thing without asking. So yeah, managed to ditch him. So you have to be a bit careful about who jumps on board, don't you? So we put out an expressions of interest form so we could choose who we wanted on the working group, and got some really good people. I got a little list here. It was pretty impressive, actually. We've got a geotech engineer, a planner who does work nationally, is in touch with people around the country, so she knows what planning things happen around in other councils. She's great. We have someone with experience in Māori housing social work. We have a social media person who really wanted to do Facebook properly. We have someone who's quite high up in central government who's very good at reminding civil servants of what their job really is and does it in the most beautiful language that I couldn't do. So she's great. So we've got a really good group of people on, and we've got a tiny house person who's turned up, and one or two other people who just have a really good social conscience on the working group that we set up. And we set up a Gmail account that we can all access with docs and stuff. And they had a meeting with the council. I wasn't here at the time. Some of them said they thought it went really well. But the people who owned the property where Pete lives, who are really upset by the way they've been treated. And the guy who treated them badly was at that meeting. And the woman of that household was there. And she said, before we start, I just want to reiterate the problems that I've had, and I want to say how I feel about it. And she did. And the guy did not apologise. It just moved on to the next agenda. And there's still been no apology from the guy who's actually caused all the trouble. I did tell the chief executive to investigate them because I was hoping we might see the end of him, but we haven't. So we've had a meeting, and then with the council, they've apparently made quite a few changes to their website. That's much easier. But they're still telling everyone that they need a consultant to be able to do anything. The woman, Jane, has not had an easy road, and things have not got much better. Pete still doesn't feel able to put in a kitchen or a bathroom because it can be a sleep out if you haven't got a kitchen or bathroom, but he thinks they might just evict him if he puts one in. So he's still living without a kitchen or bathroom of his own. So I haven't got great results yet to tell you, but we've got a process, but I can't say, the council's kind of doing what we've asked in any way. So We have become a bit of a clearinghouse for people who are having trouble with the council, who we have a couple of people who are really willing to give advice to them about geotech reports and about all that have got some really good engineering skills, and that are helping others now in the community. I'm still hot on the idea that they have at least a decent complaints process so people can bring complaints forward. Otherwise, we're going to become the clearinghouse of everyone's complaints. And I'm currently trying to concoct with the others a group of scenarios, and like we want the council to tie-ho to stop harassing people, and maybe just doing a basic check of safety and sanitation of houses they hear about, and then leave them for 2 or 3 years till they've sorted out their policies and processes. Leaving 2 people full-time to try and track down half of the people and deal with consent issues that we are dealing with, just nonsense. So we're asking that of them at the moment, as well as trying to input into long-term policy change. We developed a vision of our own. Here's our vision: a district where everybody's human right to housing is realised, and we want to facilitate positive change for people wanting affordable, healthy and sustainable housing. We then have principles. Housing is a right, not a commodity. And we give practical effect to Te Reo Māori. There's quite big issues here around Māori housing. I mean, Māori people have it so much harder than the rest of us because they can't get mortgages and things on Māori land. I think the council will go a bit easier on them because they're a bit scared of getting involved with some of it around the back blocks and the iwi, main iwi areas. We encourage options that build thriving communities and relationships and support the whare tapawhā well-being. So we're really into how can we have tiny houses or people sharing land, and how we support one another in these places of environmentally friendly solutions. Our objectives: so we want to represent communities on housing, existing and future district plans, their interpretation and implementation. And we want to work with other bodies that share our mission. After our public meeting, the Community Development Officer in our council had a bit of money set aside with the Homelessness Prevention Alliance, and they used that money to bring Zola to town. Now that was helpful. So we had a workshop for the staff and a public meeting in the evening, which gave people an idea of other options that could be pursued here and the kind of language we need when we're looking at other options. Zola gave an overview of what happens here in New Zealand and what happens overseas. And all of that was really vital too, and just helping us. And the other thing that happened too is that we extended our networks even further through that and found a couple of other people, one expert on social media and one on Māori housing, to join our group from that meetings of Zola's. Okay, so support the council develop a housing strategy that would meet our community needs and aspirations in the context of the housing and environmental crises. To encourage housing that actively supports residents to build relationships and engage with communities. And suggesting changes to plans, policy and process to reduce complexity and cost, enable choices and options. Sharing information, providing practical support for people engaging with councils and iwi. Practical support and advice on how to get through the system. Sharing information, skills and experience, providing links to relevant resources. Bringing interested people together to invite others to join. Providing a repository for stories of people's experiences, challenge and solutions, and to be a voice for people under threat of eviction. We've arranged to go to talk to the councillors as a whole. There's 5 minutes for public issues at the beginning of every council meeting. So we've slotted in. Last time I went for 5 minutes, we were allowed 20, so I'm hoping we will again. So we want to update all the councillors on our objectives and how we are already working with the council. We want to thank them for that, and also express our concern about the slowness, and to mention things like inclusionary zoning, which Zola talked about, that we want to see if the councillors to bring up. You know, what's really good is we have a real variety of people on the, we'll have, I don't know, subcommittees or whatever little groups that can act on different things. We're extremely lucky with the people that we've joined. So, Zola, you asked where we're going to find money. I don't know that we need any. We've found some free venue and people are giving their time freely. So I imagine in 2 years we might need money if we wanted to run some workshops and things. By then we would have a track record of what we've done. I think if we apply for money now, we wouldn't get it. I think we need to have a track record to say this is what we can do for without money.
I have some questions. That's one of the things that I've never understood is what weight do the councils actually have to change the laws around co-housing situations? Is it on a more government level? Because every council seems to be different around the country, which I don't understand. Why is there not one sort of rule about things? And like you said, so long as everyone's got their grey water and black water sorted and the building is built to code, what's the problem?
I mean, I do think there are issues that, for instance, if we had 3 tiny houses on our land, presumably there's more people going in and out of our entrance, there's more use of council facilities or whatever, and perhaps we should be paying more rates, and that's reasonable. There will be things like that we'd have to deal with, but I don't see why they should stop it.
What I'm finding is the main lag or lack in council around housing is their engagement. They lack the ability to, public participation is very important for council, and that's where the trust comes from. There's actually levels of engagement anywhere from inform all the way to be co-designing. And really with communities, you want the upper end of the spectrum where you've got more of the partnership approach. And that's where the trust will come in, and that's where their innovative solutions to housing will come as well. So part of the work I'm doing is helping councils to realize that not only is there the gap in terms of what communities need, it's actually getting legislated that local governments actually have more public participation. So there's a document called The Review of the Future of Local Government, and a report was just released that says that councils are not meeting the needs of their communities. They're not climate focused. They're not focused on resilience and intergenerational well-being. So that Te Whare Tapawha that you mentioned around the well-being lens, the future of local government is going to be well-being focused, intergenerational focused, and having to make much more use of public participation. Now, the great thing about the document is that it says that it goes into the financing that's currently available for local government. So it has a graph where it shows that central government has been asking more and more of local government roles and responsibilities, and yet the amount of money that local government has been dished out by central government, or how much money they're allowed to keep, is stayed down here. So there's this widening gap of council not able to do because central government's taking too much money and not giving enough of it back. So this report also outlines how central government has to partner more with local government in terms specifically of funding. And that's where I was saying about with the Whare group, is I believe that if a group aligns itself with council in a way like Whare has done, is that because it talks about citizen-led, supporting citizen-led, mission-driven initiatives, that the local government has to then be able to fund that, and that has to come from central government. So there's sort of like a funneling that this report talks about of money back into the communities, back into local government, and back into citizen-led initiatives. So again, if we're talking policy change and planning reform and things like that, that's where government will be able to have more money and resources to do it. Because at the moment, if you talk to any planner about policy change and engagement, they're going to say, we don't have the budget. And I think councils that are made aware that this report has come out, that people know what's in the report, that we're expecting much better of them, and that they actually can lobby for money, we need to get those councils on board. We can actually jumpstart the councils that have shown initial initiative, like Whakatāne has done. You mentioned you do have somebody from central government on your board. I would read through that Future of Local Government report and then figure out where's that channel to central government, so you're able to get that funding and other resources and things coming through. In that workshop that I gave in Whakatāne, where Ruth had said I came up, is I do give some case studies of policies where the local government has worked with a local community, whether it be an eco-village, a co-housing, tiny home. And I give the case studies where the policies have changed to accommodate certain initiatives.
I think in that similar situation, they're not asking for money. They're asking to be able to have the right to take responsibility for themselves. Well, one thing you talked about, Ruth, was that so long as there was a fairness in how councils treat people. But from my experience, a lot of people who have an ordinary house, who've got resource consent and done building codes and paid all of those things, they're resentful of tiny house people because they've had to pay all those things and we're not paying those things. But the argument there, of course, is, well, you probably wouldn't want to live in a tiny house. But there's that sort of thing. Well, I paid all this. The questions, I don't understand why there's not a willingness from council. What are they afraid of? Why is there not a willingness from council to actually listen to people? And I think what you've done, Ruth, is amazing. Like, you've basically got all the community there. It's not just one person going in and talking to council, is it? It's basically getting as many people in the area to go to a meeting like that and follow it up so they know it's not just a one-off one person. When I first looked at Thames nearly 4 years ago now, I went to the council to ask, I'm thinking about building a tiny house and putting on the land, what do I need to know? Well, they just rolled their eyes and basically couldn't really tell me anything. I don't understand where there's no will from the council. What are they afraid of?
I do think, in terms of that possible resentment by people who pay a lot of rates, I do think it's probably fair that tiny house people pay a slightly more rates. Our name is WHARE, which stands for, it took us a while to work this one out, Whakatāne Housing Action Reform Enthusiasts. Okay, so that's who we are. So that's how we got our name.
It seems to be that councils are able to make subtle changes within their boundaries, that there's no government umbrella to say this is what everyone must do. The councils have that discretion. And so that's where Zola's expertise comes in, because she has that ability to understand a few of the councils. And then if we can let councils know that it's being done elsewhere, then they're more likely to change.
What we're finding is that the individuals are staff members, not necessarily councillors. Yeah, so it's the disconnect in council. We speak about it as the council, but it's actually two bodies. And then there's departments within the other body. And then with the councillors, there's a spectrum, So it's actually quite a lot of different people who hold a lot of different values and different interests in the community. I think we really need to, like with Fade's work, when Karen invited me up to present, she's like, get some of these people who are a little bit in their box with how they're thinking with their job, the tick box kind of folks, get them to come and join this workshop. So we're getting some out of the box thinking for them to move outside of what they feel like they have to do to what actually moving into that realm of possibility. What could they do? And giving them examples of where policies have changed and where planning staff have worked differently, so that they're realizing that, no, they don't actually need to work in the same way as they've always done. But I think those planning staff are key to get them upskilled. And then I think also it's very key to get some council folks on board that really get it, because they're most likely coming from the community and have more of a heart to try to represent the community's interests. So it's a long game of relationship building and showing up at the public forums where you get a chance to be in front of the councillors, but really then it's making meetings one-on-one with planning staff if you can. A lot of councils do have at least one free meeting with a planner to go over a development idea. They're just not clued up in terms of community-led development, in terms of these other ways of maybe clustering houses, not having garages and that kind of thing. So it really pays to do a little bit of research around what other councils are doing.
I think that what Ruth was saying in Whakatāne, which I think was brilliant, was to actually go to the council's manifesto and pull out bits where they're supposed to, and that's brilliant.
And I mean, you could go to them and say, look, we really want to work with you. We really,
yes,
we have similar aims and goals of a sustainable city, and we feel we have a role to play in helping you meet your aims. So instead of being like this is to teach conflict resolution, but instead of being us versus them, you use the we word. So how we can work together and we are on the same side. If you can get clever with looking at their policies and their things and they work for you, that's great. Unfortunately, our housing policies don't work for us at all. So we have to go in harder on those ones. Yes, we need your support to enable us to meet our shared goals, something like that.
And in a way, Ruth, what you're saying, Ruth, is that it's also like you come up. It's always advantageous to come up with the solutions, like you're saying, like, okay, so I'm going to share my land. Nellie wants to share the land, and we're willing to pay more rates. So each one on the land would pay some rates as well. So you create for them a positive way forward.
That's right. And I think that is the most important messaging, which is it's a we. So we all care about our community. And we all want to be able to see everyone in our community thrive. Let's work out how we do that together. Take out any of those barriers. We got to take out the us and them languaging. One thing you can all do in your communities, if you're hearing us and them languaging, try to switch it to a we, and know that there's always people, staff member and counselors, who have the same value and desire as you do. And it's really just imagining those people on your side.
I think it's also important to make the differentiation between someone who is homeless and what that costs the council, and allowing that same homeless person to take responsibility for themselves, and help themselves with support. How much does it actually cost the council, and let alone the mental health and well-being? But basically, just if they're looking at finances, what does that cost the council? It's a lot more than if they were being able to live in a really nice caravan or whatever. It's way more.
Yeah, that's right. I do have one report that says that for every $1 invested by the council in supporting community-led housing, there's $3 worth of investment that is realized, and that's either in a savings, in health, or not ending up in a worse place, and the cost that the government bears for that, but it's also the benefits, the well-being benefits of people being able to then contribute positively to their community because they have a stable home environment.
I hope to be able to report back in 2 years that actually something's changed.
Yeah, I'm feeling very positive with your committee. Okay, well, I'm going to draw us to a close. Thank you so much, Ruth, for your presentation, all your efforts there, for showing to inspire us. This is a follow-up to this episode, given that it was recorded 9 months ago. I mentioned in the episode about the Future of Local Government report, where there was actually a lot of great things that could happen if those recommendations were put into place, but that does need to be actioned by the central government. And at this time, it is not known whether the central government will actually enact on those recommendations. Ruth said that the council, in the meantime, has taken on a consultant to look around the country at options that other councils are using and make recommendations for changes. So Ruth is hoping that the WHARE group will have a chance to read that report. The WHARE group and the Waikato District Council held a follow-up community meeting 9 months later on the 7th of March to be able to report back on the progress that they made from the time that WHARE was put into place. And I can make a link to that presentation that was given in the show notes. And final words. So I recommend that you check out the Common Ground website, where we offer a lot of resources about being able to help for-purpose developers, councils, community housing providers, and communities to better understand and implement community-led housing and regenerative housing. We can help with community engagement, with research and strategies, so that every community can have houses that reflect the aspirations and the needs of the local community. I look forward to having you tell me what it is that you would like to have as a topic for the upcoming episodes, any recommendations of speakers as well. There's a form if you go to the Common Ground website under the show page where you can fill out a form if you'd like to be a guest, and we are looking for sponsors as well. You can also check us out on Facebook at Common Ground. You can check our YouTube channel, it's called Common Ground, and you can communicate with us on those channels. And please be in touch with all your ideas. We'd love to hear from you. Kia ora.